In Ember Flats, Utah, winter did not hide the red cliffs. It made them shine. Sergeant Rhett Varden came there hoping the snow would keep the world far away. Then he found Mica, an abandoned German shepherd no one thought was useful anymore. What began as a temporary rescue led him to Stoneglass Ranch, a place he did not want and a duty he could not easily refuse. Beneath the frozen ground, water was being taken, records were being twisted, and a divided town was running out of trust. But sometimes the first one to hear what is wrong is not the loudest person in the room. Share your own touching story with an animal you love, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Snow made the red country brighter. That was the first thing Sergeant Rhett Sullivan Varden noticed as his patrol SUV climbed west through the high desert of Utah. Winter had not darkened the land around Ember Flats. It had sharpened it. White lay across the mesas in clean, wind-carved sheets, and the red stone rose through it in long, exposed ribs, as if the earth itself had been stripped down to bone and fire. Rhett drove with both hands low on the wheel. He was 47, tall, athletic, and broad through the shoulders, but there was nothing careless in the way he occupied space. His fitted dark navy Utah Highway Patrol uniform sat beneath a black tactical vest, the badge on his chest dulled by road salt and winter dust. A radio mic rested near his collar. His duty belt carried what it needed and nothing extra. His black boots were clean enough for inspection, but scarred enough to prove he still stepped into bad weather when the road asked him to. His face was rugged and angular, light tan from years under open skies, with a narrow scar crossing the lower edge of his lip. His blue-gray eyes carried the habit of measuring doorways, mirrors, hands, shoulders, anything that might move before a person admitted it would. His dark brown hair, cut short in a police style, had begun to show ash at the temples. The stubble along his jaw was kept short, not from vanity, but from discipline. Most people who met Rhett called him steady. They were not wrong. They were only missing the part where steadiness could become another kind of hiding. The assignment at Ember Flats had been easy to accept. 60 days of winter traffic control, canyon closures, freight route checks, and emergency response in a town too small to expect much from a state trooper except competence. The station had 3 officers rotating through a converted county building behind the plow depot. No welcome dinners, no retirement banquets, no unit reunions with men who remembered names Rhett avoided saying out loud. He had asked for the posting before anyone else could. His captain had looked at him for a long moment across the desk. "Long winter out there," she had said. "That's why they need someone. That's why they need a team." Rhett had not answered that. He had learned long ago that silence, if held cleanly enough, could pass for agreement. The truth was simpler and worse. Rhett knew how to serve beside people. He knew how to move with them, protect them, read danger around them. But staying after the danger passed was a different skill, and he had never mastered it. After leaving the Navy, he had taken police work because the rules were clear and the purpose was useful. Then he had slowly arranged his life so that no one had to expect him at dinner, call him on holidays, or wonder why he stared too long when a chair scraped behind him. He was not ruined. He did not make a spectacle of his damage. He simply left early, answered late, and chose roads that ended where other people stopped driving. The first call near Ember Flats came before he reached the town limit. A semi had slipped sideways near the Black Mesa truck stop, blocking half the service road beside the fuel pumps. No one was hurt. The driver, a heavy-set man in a knit cap, was more embarrassed than frightened. Rhett set cones, called the plow crew, helped place traction mats, and kept his voice calm while the wind came hard across the lot. By the time the truck was free, late afternoon light had turned silver. The truck stop crouched beneath it, a low building with a cracked sign, glowing vending machines, diesel pumps, and a row of old cottonwoods behind the dumpsters. Snow hissed across the pavement in dry lines. Somewhere nearby, a loose sheet of metal tapped against a wall. Rhett was walking back toward his SUV when he heard the scratching. It was not loud. In the open wind, most men would have missed it. Rhett stopped. The sound came again, thin and uneven, from behind the vending machines where a stack of empty soda crates leaned against the wall. He moved around them slowly, one hand lifting his flashlight, the other staying clear of his sidearm. He had learned not to approach anything cornered as if it owed him trust. A cardboard shipping box sat half-collapsed against the concrete, its bottom soaked through. Someone had folded a tarp over the top, but the tarp had slid away, letting snow dust the taped seams. The scratching came from inside. Not frantic, almost measured. Claw pause, claw pause. Rhett crouched. A note had been taped to the side in block letters blurred by moisture. Not fit for work anymore. For a moment Rhett did not move. The words were plain, practical even. The kind of words a person used when they wanted abandonment to sound like inventory management. He cut the wet tape with a folding knife and opened the box. Inside was a German Shepherd female, perhaps 4 years old, folded into a space too small for her body. Her coat was black and deep tan, the saddle across her back uneven like smoke, dragged through wet stone. Her chest and legs were the color of dry winter grass. One ear stood upright. The other had a tiny notch along the outer edge. A faint curved scar marked the front of her right shoulder. She did not lunge. That made Rhett more careful, not less. The dog lifted her head slowly. Amber-brown eyes fixed on him with a look so controlled it seemed older than fear. A cut length of chain hung from a worn black collar, its tag rubbed blank. Her ribs showed when she breathed. Snow melted along the edge of her muzzle and gathered in dark beads. "Easy," Rhett said. The dog did not believe him. He could respect that. Rhett radioed dispatch, then called County Animal Control. He kept his body angled sideways, letting the open box face the lot rather than trapping her against his shadow. The dog watched the doorway, the pumps, his hands, the reflection in the vending machine glass. She was not looking for kindness. She was looking for the next thing that might happen. County Animal Control arrived 20 minutes later in a white pickup with a dented rear bumper and a heater that rattled loudly even after the engine shut off. Jules Kettering stepped out wearing a green-gray county jacket. Waterproof cargo pants, black rubber boots, and a red brick beanie pulled over short, dark blonde hair. She was 39, compact, quick-moving, with a canvas crossbody bag that clicked softly from spare tags, leashes, and a microchip scanner inside. She took one look at the box and exhaled through her nose. "People get real poetic when they don't want to use the word abandoned," she said. Rhett handed her the note without comment. Jules read it, then looked at the dog. Her expression changed, but only a little, not pity. Pity was too heavy to use carelessly around an animal that had survived the afternoon. "Female shepherd," Jules said. 4-ish, underfed, no visible urgent distress, but I want a vet to confirm that before anybody relaxes. "Road to your shelter open? Not today. Slide closed the lower canyon. We're already doubled up on emergency kennels, because half the county thinks winter is a surprise event." She crouched several feet from the box and spoke to the dog without sweetening her voice. "Hey, girl, nobody's impressed by us either." The dog watched her. Jules ran the scanner carefully when Rhett lifted the loose collar enough for access. No chip, no readable tag, no registration in the immediate county system. Jules photographed the dog, the box, the note, the collar, and the cut chain. She filled out a temporary hold form on the tailgate of her truck while the wind worried at the corners of the paper. "I can take her if I have to," Jules said, "but she'll be in a crate in my office bathroom next to a feral tomcat and 2 very loud beagles until the road opens." The dog looked past Jules toward Rhett's patrol SUV. Jules noticed. "She came out for you? She hasn't come out." "Didn't ask that?" Rhett looked down at the shepherd. "I opened the box and didn't make it worse. Sometimes that's enough for a first vote. I'm on duty. You're also the only person here she hasn't decided against." Jules held up the form. 72-hour emergency foster. "You sign. I document. You bring her to Dr. Greaves when the road opens or when I can get him up here. If an owner appears, we deal with that legally. If no one appears, we keep following the process. I'm not looking for a dog. Most abandoned dogs weren't looking for a person either." Rhett almost refused. The answer should have been simple. He had an assignment. He had a state vehicle. He had no house prepared, no yard, no plan, and no intention of becoming responsible for another living thing that could look at him as if he mattered. The shepherd shifted inside the box. One paw slid forward onto the wet cardboard. The movement was small and controlled, but it cost her. Her eyes never left Rhett's hands. Not fit for work anymore. Rhett had heard versions of that sentence before. Not on paper, not about a dog, but in rooms where men lowered their voices when someone's name came up. In forms that never used the word broken, because broken sounded too emotional and not enough like assessment. He took the pen from Jules. 72 hours, he said. Jules nodded once. That's all the paper says. The dog did not let him lift her. Rhett did not force it. He set a folded blanket beside the box and waited. Jules brought food, but the shepherd ignored it until both humans stepped back. Then she ate 3 careful bites, stopped, and looked toward the SUV again. It took 15 minutes for her to stand. When she did, Rhett saw how thin she truly was beneath the coat. She stepped out of the box, paused when the wind hit her, then walked not to Jules's truck, not toward the building, but to the rear passenger door of Rhett's patrol vehicle. She stood there, head low, body trembling, without asking anyone to notice. Rhett opened the door. The shepherd climbed in, turned once on the blanket he placed across the seat, and lay down facing the window. Jules watched from beside the pumps. Name? She has one somewhere. Temporary name, then. Rhett looked toward the mesas beyond the lot. Snow had settled in the cracks of red rock, and the fading sun caught tiny mineral flecks until they shone through the white. Mica, he said. The dog's left ear moved. Not much. Enough. Ember Flats appeared just after dark, a scatter of yellow windows beneath high red cliffs and white ridgelines. The town still carried the bones of mining. A closed assay office, a rail spur half buried under snow, faded murals promising copper, uranium, vanadium, work, wages, futures. The winter made it beautiful in a way that almost felt like forgiveness. Rhett parked behind the seasonal police rental, a small house assigned to highway patrol during storm rotations. It had 2 rooms, a narrow kitchen, a propane heater, and no decoration except a framed emergency evacuation map on the wall. Perfect, he had thought when he first saw the photos. Nothing to explain, nothing to keep. Mica remained in the back seat after he opened the door. Rhett set food and water inside the house, then stepped away from the doorway. After a long minute, she came in. She inspected every corner, every window, the gap beneath the bathroom door. She did not eat until he sat at the kitchen table and turned his body partly away. Even then, she took only a little. He had just removed his duty belt when his phone rang. Unknown number. He considered letting it pass. Then he saw the Utah area code and answered. Sergeant Varden? This is Diane Quillen. I'm an attorney in Emery County. I handled some legal work for Cyrus Varden. Rhett stood still. The name meant almost nothing at first. A distant branch of the family. His father had mentioned Cyrus once or twice with the kind of tone used for men who lived alone by choice and kept better records than relationships. I don't know him, Rhett said. I understand. Mr. Varden passed away last week. I'm sorry to contact you like this, but your name appears in his trust documents. Rhett looked across the room. Mica had stopped eating. Diane's voice was careful, older, and precise. He pictured a woman with silver hair, clean files, and no patience for people who confused urgency with importance. This is not a personal inheritance in the ordinary sense, she continued. Stoneglass Ranch was placed into the Stoneglass Water Conservancy Trust. Mr. Varden named you as temporary successor trustee until a local board can be seated. I'm not accepting property. You are not being given property to sell, Sergeant. That is the point. Rhett said nothing. Diane let the silence stand for a few seconds. Cyrus believed Stoneglass had to be held for the town, not by the town. At least not until the paperwork was protected. He also believed you would understand the difference between ownership and duty. Rhett almost laughed, but the sound never formed. What made him think that? Another pause came through the line. This one was softer. He wrote that a man who kept leaving might be the only one honest enough to guard a place he did not want. Rhett looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, the snow reflected the porch light. His own face stared back faintly. Older than he expected, uniform half undone, shoulders still squared as if someone might call inspection. I can come in tomorrow and decline, he said. You may. I'll have the documents ready. The call ended without pressure. Rhett set the phone on the table. The house felt smaller than before. Mica had moved away from the bowl. She stood near the front door, not scratching, not whining, only facing outward with the stillness of an animal, listening to something beyond walls. Not your problem, Rhett said quietly. Mica did not turn. He did not know whether he meant the trust, the dead man, the town, or the dog. Later, Rhett spread his sleeping bag on the narrow bed but did not get inside. Old habits brought him first to the door, then each window, then the back entrance. Lock, frame, glass, sightline. He checked them once, then again with less reason than memory. Mica lay on the small rug near the front door. She did not sleep deeply. Every time the heater clicked, her ears lifted. Every time a plow passed somewhere in town, her eyes opened. Near midnight, Rhett sat at the kitchen table in the dark, boots still on, phone face down beside his hand. Snow moved outside under the porch light, bright and soundless. The old evacuation map on the wall showed roads, canyons, water routes, and one name printed near the northern ridge: Stoneglass Ranch. Mica's eyes were open, fixed toward the same direction. Rhett had spent years arranging his life, so nothing waited for him. Now a dog he had not wanted lay in front of his door. A dead man had named him in a duty he had not asked for, and somewhere beyond the clean white edge of town there was a ranch he planned to refuse before it could become a place he should have slept. Instead, he listened to Mica breathe, watched the snow brighten the dark windows, and waited for morning with the uneasy feeling that leaving Ember Flats would not be as simple as arriving. Morning came clear and sharp over Ember Flats. The storm had moved out before dawn, leaving the town under a sky so blue it looked almost polished. Snow covered the roofs, the abandoned rail spur, the empty lots beside the old mining office, and the red cliffs beyond town. Sunlight struck the mesas and bounced back hard enough to make Rhett Varden narrow his eyes as he stepped out of the seasonal police rental. Mica stood in the doorway behind him. She had eaten more before sunrise, but only after Rhett placed the bowl near the wall and walked away. She still kept distance from his hands. She tolerated his voice better than his touch. When he clipped the new slate-gray leash to her collar, she watched every movement with that same quiet, measuring caution, then stepped outside before he asked. Rhett had planned the day with the clean efficiency of a man who did not want it to become personal. Drive to Stoneglass Ranch. Inspect the property enough to understand what Diane Quillen needed him to sign. Confirm no immediate safety hazard. Refuse the trustee appointment. Return to town. Call Jules Kettering about Mica's next steps. Finish his shift. Keep moving. Plans had always been easier when they did not involve anyone else's expectation. The road north out of Ember Flats climbed between low ridges of red stone and pale winter grass. Snow lay thin where wind had swept the ground open, thick where it drifted against fence lines. Mica rode in the rear of the patrol SUV on the blanket from the night before, head raised, eyes fixed through the side window. Each time the tires passed over a cattle guard, her ears flicked. Each time Rhett glanced in the rearview mirror, she was still awake. Stoneglass Ranch appeared after the road bent around a shelf of rock. It did not rise out of the land so much as sit stubbornly inside it. A weathered ranch house faced south toward open pasture, its porch roof bowed but still standing. Beyond it, a long livestock shed stretched beside a dry lot where sheep had once worn paths through the snow. A windmill frame leaned near the water tanks, still turning by habit even though no pump rod moved beneath it. The fences were patched in places with newer wire, older boards, and the kind of temporary repairs people made when they had stopped believing permanence was worth the price. Rhett parked near the gate. Mica did not bark. She only stood on the rear seat and stared. The main gate was chained shut, but fresh tire tracks led through snow along the side, where 2 fence posts had been pulled loose and set aside. Rhett noticed the marks without touching anything. Habit made him catalog details. Tire width, boot prints, wire cut low. No fresh blood, no immediate threat, possible trespass, possible civil dispute, do not escalate. He exhaled slowly. This is already annoying, he told the dog. Mica looked at him as if annoyance was an unserious category. Rhett walked the fence line with her beside him. He had gone only 20 yards when the door of a small outbuilding opened near the rear of the ranch house. A man stepped out wearing a brown hoodie beneath a green work jacket, jeans tucked into muddy boots, and a gray knit cap pulled low over unwashed blonde hair. He was in his early 40s, built solid but worn down around the edges, with a thick jaw, tired eyes, and a beard that had not decided whether it wanted to be permanent. A heavy ring of keys hung from one hand. The man stopped when he saw Rhett's uniform. Then his gaze dropped to the dog. "State police bring dogs now?" he called. "She isn't working," Rhett said. "Neither is this place." Rhett kept his voice even. "You Gareth Varden?" The man's mouth tightened. "Depends who's asking." Rhett Varden. The name landed between them with no warmth. Gareth looked him over, from the badge to the vest to the boots planted in the snow. "Cirrus said you were military." "Used to be. Looks like you found another way to wear authority." Rhett let that pass. "Diane Quillen said I should inspect the trust property." Gareth laughed once, dry and humorless. "Trust property. That what they're calling it now?" He walked closer, but stopped on the other side of the sagging fence. Mica moved half a step ahead of Rhett, not enough to pull the leash tight, enough to place herself inside the line between the men, Gareth noticed. His hand closed around the keys until they clicked. "Cyrus told me this place was mine," he said. "I kept the pipes from freezing when he couldn't get out of bed. I fixed the north gate twice. I hauled feed for sheep he was too proud to sell. Then some lawyer finds a paper with your name on it, and suddenly I'm the trespasser. I didn't write the paper. You still drove here." Rhett looked at the cut fence. "Looks like someone else drove through first." Gareth's face reddened under the windburn. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document sealed in a plastic sleeve. "Caretaker agreement." Cyrus signed it. "Says I have occupancy rights and maintenance authority." Rhett took the sleeve only when Gareth held it through the fence. The document looked old enough to matter and vague enough to cause trouble. It allowed Gareth to live in the house annex and perform maintenance, while Cyrus remained unable to manage the property. It did not say what happened after Cyrus died. Rhett handed it back. "That doesn't give you authority to remove fencing. It gives me authority to maintain access." "To what?" Gareth pointed toward the north road beyond the shed. "Survey crews. Vermilion Ridge. They're bringing work back here." Rhett had heard the name in town before sunrise. A poster at the gas station promised community renewal, new extraction jobs, and infrastructure investment. The words had been printed over a photograph of smiling men in hard hats standing beneath clean blue sky. Gareth's version was less polished. "They'll pay for road repairs," he said. "Contract local drivers. Reopen the machine shop. Maybe keep this town from turning into a souvenir with a zip code. You signed access rights? I signed preliminary use for the north lane." "You don't own the north lane." Gareth's shoulders lifted. "Neither do you." Mica's body became very still. Rhett felt it before he saw it, the shift in her weight, the lowering of her head, the focus moving from Gareth's face to Gareth's right hand. The keys had stopped clicking. Gareth had wrapped one key between his fingers, not as a weapon exactly, but as a frightened man's substitute for certainty. Rhett shortened the leash by an inch. "Mica," he said softly. "Easy." The dog did not look back at him, but she obeyed the tone. Her body remained tense. Her feet did not advance. Gareth saw the restraint, and something in his expression changed. Not fear. Recognition, maybe. The strange discomfort of realizing an animal had more control than he did. Rhett stepped back first. The movement cost him more than Gareth could know. "I'm not here to throw you out today," Rhett said. "I'm going to speak with Diane." "Good. Ask her why Cyrus needed a man who never came here while he was alive." That one found its mark. Rhett gave no sign of it. He returned to the SUV with Mica at his side, but the question followed him down the road and into Ember Flats. Diane Quillen's office sat above a closed hardware store on Main Street. She was in her early 60s, slender, silver-haired, and dressed in a charcoal cardigan over a white blouse, with rectangular glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Her office smelled of paper, lemon polish, and old heat from cast-iron radiators. 3 filing cabinets stood behind her desk like silent witnesses. She listened without interrupting while Rhett described Gareth, the caretaker agreement, the broken fence, and the Vermilion Ridge document. Then she removed a folder from the top drawer. "Cyrus expected Gareth to contest this," she said. "He expected it and left me to handle it. He expected a court to handle it. You are not being asked to win a family argument. I'm being named in one." Diane looked at him over her glasses. "You are being named as temporary trustee because the land needed a legal handoff before anyone could sell it, drill under it, or bury the paperwork in confusion." She opened the folder. Stoneglass Water Conservancy Trust was written across the first page. Beneath it were maps, notarized amendments, a schedule of water monitoring equipment, and a list of future board seats. One representative from town government, one from small ranch holders, one from residential well owners, one independent water specialist, and one public safety liaison. Rhett read in silence. No personal sale authority, no mineral lease authority, no distribution of profit to the trustee, emergency power limited to preservation of land, records, water access, and public safety until board seating. He looked up. Cyrus didn't leave me a ranch. No, Diane said. He left you a locked door and made you hold the key until the right people could gather. I can decline. You can petition to resign. A judge will likely appoint an interim fiduciary from outside the county. That may be clean. It may also take time. How much time? Enough for interested parties to create facts on the ground. Rhett closed the folder. For years, he had trained himself to hear obligation as a trap. People said they needed him, and somewhere behind the words came risk, grief, anger, blame. But this was not a person asking to be loved. It was a dry set of pages asking not to be mishandled. A bell rang downstairs as someone entered the building. Diane glanced toward the hallway. That may be Mr. Kane. Who? Before she could answer, a man appeared at the open office door, leaning less on his cane than pretending not to need it. He was short, broad in the chest, and weathered in a way that made him seem carved rather than aged. A shearling coat hung from his shoulders. His beard was silver and closely trimmed. His pale blue eyes moved first to Rhett, then to the folder, then to the dog hair on Rhett's uniform. You the Varden they found? He asked. Rhett stood. Rhett, Elwood Kane. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. I run sheep south of the ridge. Or I did, before my well started acting like a liar. Diane's expression softened just slightly. Mr. Kane has water rights adjacent to Stoneglass. Elwood snorted. I have paper rights. Water hasn't been impressed. He laid a small notebook on Diane's desk. Inside were handwritten measurements from his well, dates, temperatures, and depth readings. The last entries had been circled. Rhett saw the drop immediately. Not dramatic enough for a newspaper headline. Enough to worry anyone with animals depending on it. I'm not asking to own anything, Elwood said. I'm asking whether Cyrus's old stock well can be opened for emergency use if mine falls another foot. Rhett did not answer quickly. That restraint surprised him. A month ago, he would have said no to avoid complications or yes to end the conversation. Now he looked at Diane. Can the trust allow that? For limited emergency agricultural use, documented and metered, yes, if you remain trustee long enough to authorize it. Elwood studied Rhett. If it helps, I don't trust you either. It doesn't help, Rhett said. Still true. For the first time that day, Diane almost smiled. Rhett signed nothing except an acknowledgement that he had received the trust documents and would make no decision until reviewing immediate preservation needs. It was less commitment than Diane wanted, and more than Rhett had planned to give. Outside, Mica waited in the SUV. When Rhett opened the rear door, she stood, sniffed the cold air, and looked past him toward the northern road. Not toward town, toward Stoneglass. By late afternoon, Rhett had driven back to the ranch with Diane's copies in a locked evidence style document case that was not evidence, and not his. Gareth's truck remained near the annex, but Gareth did not come out. A fresh padlock hung on the livestock shed. Its brass face flashed in the winter sun. Rhett did not touch it. He walked Mica around the public side of the yard and checked the visible water tanks. The first tank was empty. The second held a skin of ice at the bottom. The third had a dark stain below the spigot, as if water had once leaked there and stopped long ago. Pipes ran between them under snow and frozen weeds. Near the porch, Mica lowered her head and sniffed a shallow trough. Then she looked at Rhett, took 3 steps toward the dry tank, and waited. I don't have an answer for you, he said. Mica kept waiting anyway. Back at the rental house after sunset, Rhett placed a fresh bowl of water in the kitchen. Mica approached, drank once, then stopped. She nudged the bowl with her muzzle. Water shivered against the metal sides. Mica. She pushed again, slow and deliberate, sliding the bowl across the linoleum toward the front door. It bumped the threshold and tipped, spilling a bright stream across the floorboards. Rhett reached for a towel, then stopped. The water moved in a thin line toward the porch, toward the dark outside, toward the road that climbed to Stoneglass. Mica lay down beside the open door, chin on her paws, eyes fixed into the winter night. Rhett stood over the spilled water longer than necessary. He did not imagine the dog understood trusts or wells or mineral companies. He did not need her to. She had only made visible what he had spent the day trying to keep in separate boxes. Gareth's anger, Cyrus's papers, Elwood's dry well, the empty tanks, the locked shed, the way a town could argue about survival while something beneath it quietly disappeared. He cleaned the floor. Then he opened Diane's folder again. By morning, he still intended to refuse if he could, but he no longer believed refusal would leave nothing behind. Rhett Varden filed the conflict notice before breakfast. He did it from the small desk in the seasonal police rental, with Mica lying beneath the window and the heater ticking softly against the wall. Outside, ember flats shone under fresh snow, bright enough to make the old sidewalks and shuttered storefronts look cleaner than they were. The town had the brittle beauty of a place that still knew how to reflect light, even after losing most of what once kept it alive. Rhett typed with 2 fingers, reading every line twice. Temporary successor trustee, related to Stoneglass Water Conservancy Trust. Potential dispute involving family member. Potential contact with private mineral company. Requesting guidance and recusal from any investigative decisions connected to the property. When the reply came from his captain, it was brief and careful. Rhett could continue traffic duty, storm response, and public safety operations. He could document immediate hazards if he encountered them. But any evidence, complaint, or suspected criminal conduct involving Stoneglass had to go through the Emery County Sheriff's Office. Rhett read the message once. Then again. He had expected the answer. That did not make it easier. He had spent years building a life around control. Check the road before turning. Check the room before entering. Check the person before trusting. In combat, in police work, in every rented room afterward, control had felt like the last honest form of care. If he saw the danger first, maybe no one else would have to pay for what he missed. Now the right thing was to stand back. Mica lifted her head when he pushed away from the desk. "Don't look at me like that," he said. She looked at him exactly like that. By 10 o'clock, Rhett was sitting across from Sheriff Marla Pennock in a county office that smelled of coffee, old carpet, and wet wool. Marla was 55, compact and solid, with short salt and pepper hair cut just below her jaw and a face that seemed built for weather more than conversation. Her tan sheriff's shirt was pressed, but the cuffs showed wear. A red spiral notebook sat open beside her hand. She listened without interrupting while Rhett explained Stoneglass, Gareth, the locked shed, the empty tanks, and the possible Vermilion Ridge access agreement. When he finished, Marla tapped her pen once against the notebook. "Civil property dispute," she said. "Trust documentation, possible unauthorized access, possible water issue, possible environmental issue, possible family mess. That covers it." "No, Sergeant." "That keeps it from sounding dramatic." She looked at him steadily. "You don't get to use a state badge to win an argument with your cousin." "I know. Do you?" Rhett held her gaze. "That's why I'm here." Marla studied him for one more second, then wrote something down. "Good. Because I do not need a winter posting turning into a jurisdictional rodeo. He has the shed locked. Then we use the right process. There may be equipment inside. There may be old feed buckets inside. We do not guess our way into locked buildings." Rhett felt the old impatience rise, clean and hot. Not anger at Marla. Anger at the waiting, at forms, at the fact that harm often moved faster than permission. Marla saw it and did not soften. "Your job," she said, "is to keep roads open and people breathing. My job is to keep this clean enough that nobody can throw it out later." The sentence stayed with him longer than he wanted it to. That afternoon, Jules Kettering met Rhett at Dr. Alden Greaves's clinic on the edge of town. The clinic had once been a laundromat, and the faded outline of the old sign still showed beneath the new one. A row of mule deer watched from the snowy lot as Rhett led Mica inside. Mica did not like the metal exam table. She did not panic. She simply locked her legs and refused it with the calm certainty of an animal who had decided there were mistakes she would not repeat. Dr. Greaves, a lean man of 59 with tired green eyes and a gray beard trimmed close to his jaw, took one look at her posture and lowered himself onto a rolling stool instead. "Floor exam," he said. "Tables for patients who haven't already voted." Jules grinned. "I like him because he loses arguments gracefully. I lose them early," Grieve said. "Saves time." He examined Mica slowly, narrating every touch before making it. Teeth, paws, ears, shoulder, breathing, weight, old scar. Mica tolerated him because he never cornered her, and because Rhett sat 6 feet away instead of holding her down. When Greaves ran his fingers near the faint curved scar on her right shoulder, Mica's eyes shifted toward the steel cabinet behind him. A tray inside rattled as the heater clicked on. Her whole body changed. Not fear exactly. Readiness. Her ears came forward. Her nose lowered. Her eyes moved from the cabinet to the floor seam beside the wall. Greaves stopped touching her. "Well," he said quietly, "that tells me something." Rhett did not move. "What?" "She has training. Search work, probably. Maybe disaster response. Maybe collapsed structures. See how she tracks sound through the floor before she checks scent? That is not backyard behavior." Jules folded her arms. "Could have been a private team. Or a contractor. Or someone who didn't keep records where we can find them." Greaves sat back. "She's underweight, stressed, but not beyond recovery. The shoulder scar is old. Her joints look good. What concerns me is her response to metal impacts and enclosed spaces." "Too sensitive?" Rhett asked. "Or too committed? Some dogs wash out because they quit. Some wash out because they will not leave a problem once they find it." Mica stood very still, head angled toward the cabinet. Rhett looked at her and, for the first time, did not see a stray that had chosen the wrong patrol SUV. He saw a worker whose last paper tag had called her useless because she had cared too long. That evening, Rhett went back to Stoneglass with Marla, not as an investigator, but as the temporary trustee who could identify the locked structure and confirm trust property boundaries. Mica came too, with Jules's temporary foster tag now clipped beside the blank metal disc on her collar. Gareth watched from the annex porch, shoulders hunched inside his green work jacket. "You brought the sheriff," he said. Marla answered before Rhett could. "I brought myself. It's my residence. The annex may be under review. The livestock shed is listed as trust maintenance property. We're not entering today. We're documenting condition and requesting administrative access through the county." Gareth's jaw worked. The key ring in his hand clicked once, then stopped. Mica heard it. Her ears lifted, but she stayed beside Rhett. Near the shed, snow had drifted against the lower boards. The padlock was new. The hasp was old. A faint vibration moved through the wood under Rhett's glove when he laid his hand against the frame. He removed his hand at once. Marla noticed. "What's something running?" Gareth said. "Old pipes settle." "Pipes don't hum," Rhett said. Marla lifted her pen. "Do not make this a search. I'm not." Mica stepped forward until her nose almost touched the shed door. Then she lowered her head, not to sniff the ground, but to listen. Her left ear, the one with the tiny notch, angled toward a seam between the boards. She stayed there long enough that the cold began to sting Rhett's fingers through his gloves. Gareth looked away first. Marla wrote that down too. The county process moved faster than Rhett expected, mostly because Diane Quillen had already organized Cyrus's trust papers with the precision of a woman who distrusted future chaos. By the next morning, Marla had authorization for administrative entry based on potential unauthorized utility modification and preservation of trust-owned infrastructure. Rhett stood outside the boundary tape while deputies opened the shed. He hated being outside the tape. Inside, the shed held old lambing pens, stacked fencing panels, rusted tools, and a section of floor newer than the boards around it. Marla did not need Rhett to point it out. She photographed everything, logged the entry, and had one deputy remove the loose section while another recorded. No one found a hidden will, no family confession, no dramatic box of secrets. Under the floor was a narrow service cavity, and inside it ran a new pipe wrapped in gray insulation. A compact pump sat behind a plywood shield, its vibration traveling through the shed frame. The line disappeared under the north wall, toward the old monitoring wells Cyrus had listed in the trust inventory. Marla looked at Gareth. Gareth stared at the pipe as if it had betrayed him by existing where other people could see it. "Who installed this?" she asked. He swallowed. "Contractors." "For whom?" No answer. Marla did not press harder in front of everyone. She only closed the notebook. Then we'll ask properly. While Marla secured the shed, Rhett remained outside with Mica. The dog stood beside him, not triumphant, not excited. Her eyes followed the open floor, as if she expected something living to be beneath it. "There's no one down there," Rhett said softly. Mica leaned her shoulder against his knee for 1 second. Then she stepped away. The discovery changed the sound of Ember Flats. By noon, people were talking in the grocery aisle, at the plow depot, beside fuel pumps, outside the shuttered assay office. Some said Vermilion Ridge had been stealing water. Others said old ranchers had always blamed outsiders when wells dropped. Some said Rhett had come to town and stirred trouble within 3 days. Others said Cyrus must have known something before he died. Etta Loomis found the next piece without leaving the county records room. She was 63, narrow as a fence rail, with silver hair pinned in a knot and reading glasses that hung low on her nose. Her office occupied the back of the courthouse, where old maps lived in flat drawers, and nobody touched anything without her noticing. Sienna Page stood beside her when Rhett arrived with Marla. Sienna was in her mid-40s, wearing a teal field jacket and snow-damp boots, her brown hair tied low. She had the look of someone who had been told interesting theory too many times by men who had not read her data. Etta spread 3 permit applications across the table. "Same language," she said. "Different parcels." Marla leaned in. "That happens with corporate forms, not this language." Etta tapped 1 paragraph with a pencil. Same aquifer separation claim. Same harmless draw conclusion. Same typo in monitoring. Sienna placed Cyrus's old water map beside the applications. "Their model says Stoneglass is isolated. Cyrus's data says it connects south and east through fractured sandstone. So do my recent readings." Rhett looked at the overlapping lines: roads, wells, dry stock tanks. A town built over old promises and newer omissions. He wanted to ask what they needed from him. Instead, he stepped back and let Marla speak. By evening, Benton Rusk had gathered half the town in the old-school gym. He did not look like a man people would instinctively distrust. Benton was broad, clean, and warm-faced, with silver in his brown hair and a charcoal coat that cost more than most winter tires in the parking lot. He stood beneath the basketball hoop with a projector, a polished smile, and 3 local workers behind him in new Vermilion Ridge jackets. He talked about jobs first, then roads, then medical access, school funding, tax revenue, and dignity. "Ember Flats has been asked to survive on memory," Benton said. "Memory does not keep a grocery store open. Memory does not hire your sons and daughters. We are offering work." People clapped. Not everyone. Enough. Rhett sat in the 3rd row, out of uniform as Marla had ordered. Mica lay beside his chair in her plain collar, Foster tag visible. He felt the weight of eyes on him anyway. Benton turned toward him near the end. "And now we hear concerns from a newly arrived state officer, with a family connection to the land in question. A man who may sincerely believe he is protecting this community." Benton's smile did not change. "But fear can wear a badge too." The room shifted. Rhett's hands remained open on his knees. He could have stood. He could have answered. Every trained part of him knew how to take a room back with posture, voice, command. Marla, standing near the wall, gave the smallest shake of her head, so Rhett stayed seated. Then shouting began near the aisle. A rancher accused the company of draining wells. A mechanic shouted back that ranchers had watched the town die and now wanted everyone else to die politely with them. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Someone stepped into the aisle with both hands raised, and another man shoved past him. Mica stood. Rhett reached for the leash, but she did not pull toward the noise. She walked 2 steps forward and lay down across the center aisle. Long body still, head up, amber eyes moving from one side to the other. No growl, no bark, just presence. The first man stopped because stepping over her would have looked foolish. The second stopped because she looked at him as if she had already measured his next 3 choices and preferred he make a better one. The gym quieted unevenly, then fully. Sienna rose from the side row with a folder in her hand. "If we can look at the readings," she said, voice steady but not loud, "we can argue from the same page." This time, people listened long enough for the numbers to enter the room. Rhett sat still while it happened. He did nothing. He commanded no one. He solved nothing by force of will. and somehow the room became safer. That realization did not comfort him. It unsettled him. After the meeting, Marla passed behind his chair. "Good work," she said. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly." Rhett looked down at Mica. The shepherd rested her chin on her paws, tired now, her notched ear twitching at the fading echoes inside the gym. For years, Rhett had believed protection meant standing between danger and everyone else. That night, as people filed out into the bright winter dark, he began to understand that sometimes protection meant staying seated long enough for the truth to stand on its own. Special Agent Priya Desai arrived in Ember Flats before the sun had warmed the courthouse steps. She came in a dark government sedan with road salt dried along the doors and a cracked film of ice on the windshield edges. She was 42, slender, straight-backed, and quiet in a way that made other people lower their voices without being asked. Her black hair was pinned low at the back of her neck. A charcoal coat hung over a navy suit, and a burgundy leather case rested in one hand. Rhett Varden watched her cross the parking lot from beside Sheriff Marla Pennock's cruiser. Mica stood near his left knee, leash loose, head level, amber eyes following the courthouse windows rather than the new arrival. The shepherd had learned the shape of tension around people, faster than most people admitted tension existed. Priya nodded once to Marla, then to Rhett. "Sergeant Varden," she said. "Before I take anything from this office, I need your signature on a roll statement." Rhett had expected that. He still disliked hearing it. Priya opened her case on the hood of Marla's cruiser and removed a form clipped to a blue folder. "You are temporary successor trustee for Stoneglass Water Conservancy Trust. You are also a Utah Highway Patrol sergeant assigned to winter operations. For this matter, you are not an investigator. You are not collecting evidence unless directed during an immediate safety event. You are a reporting witness and a trust representative for preservation purposes only." Marla folded her arms. "I told him the short version. I prefer signatures to memories," Priya said. Rhett took the pen. The page was simple, clean, unemotional. It drew a line around what he could do and what he could not touch. He signed. Priya watched the ink dry for a second, then placed a strip of cobalt blue evidence tape across the folder containing copies from the shed entry. "Good. Now nobody gets to claim this case began with a state officer protecting a family claim." Rhett looked toward the tape. "That why you use blue?" "That, and because people notice when something has moved from local argument to state record." Inside the courthouse, Etta Loomis had already claimed the large table in the records room. Maps lay open beneath glass weights. Permit applications, land use notices, and water monitoring logs had been arranged in careful rows. Etta moved between them like a librarian guarding old scripture, one pencil tucked behind her ear and another in her hand. Sienna Page stood beside a wall map, marking well locations with removable dots. Her teal field jacket was unzipped, but she had not taken it off, as if part of her still expected to be sent back into the cold before anyone listened properly. Priya did not rush them. She read first. That became the mood of the morning. Not panic, not outrage. Reading. Comparing marking dates, signatures, survey coordinates, draw rates, identical sentences in different applications. The same misspelled technical term appearing on 3 separate Vermilion Ridge filings for 3 separate parcels. "This isn't laziness," Priya said at last. Sienna looked over. "No, it's a template." Etta's pencil stopped. "A dishonest one." Priya placed 2 applications side by side. If Stoneglass appears hydrologically separate, then drawdown at nearby domestic wells becomes unrelated. If it is unrelated, small landowners look unlucky instead of harmed. If they look unlucky long enough, they sell. Marla's jaw tightened, and if Vermilion controls the monitoring point, they control the story of the water. Sienna finished. Rhett stood near the door, saying nothing. He wanted to ask how much they needed. He wanted to drive to Stoneglass, open every gate, put every person in a chair, and make the facts line up where he could see them. Instead, he kept one hand lightly on Mica's leash and let the people assigned to the case do their jobs. Priya noticed. "You're quiet, Sergeant." That was the instruction. "Good. Keep disappointing your instincts." Mica leaned her shoulder briefly against Rhett's leg, then shifted away before he could mistake it for comfort. By afternoon, Gareth Varden had become less of a nuisance and more of a hinge. He sat in the interview room at the sheriff's office, not under arrest, not relaxed, one hand wrapped around the overloaded key ring he carried everywhere. He had removed his knit cap, revealing blonde-gray hair flattened from days of wearing it. Without the cold wind reddening his face, he looked younger and more exhausted. Priya sat across from him. Marla leaned against the wall. Rhett was not in the room. That had been Priya's decision and, reluctantly, his agreement. He watched through the interior window from the hallway, Mica sitting beside him. Gareth talked with the defensiveness of a man trying to keep three lies standing by leaning them against one another. Cyrus had promised him the ranch. The company had only wanted access. The pipe was temporary. The pump was testing pressure. The money had been relocation support. The missing meters were old. The broken fence was maintenance. Priya let him build the whole structure. Then she removed one text message printout. Gareth stopped talking. Through the glass, Rhett saw the shift. Not confession. Not yet. Just the first moment a man realized someone had brought a tool made for the lock he was hiding behind. Priya did not raise her voice. That made it worse for him. The interview ended without a breakthrough. Gareth left through the side door, shoulders high, keys clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Rhett did not follow. Mica did not rise. Outside, snow blew in soft spirals across the parking lot, too beautiful for the ugliness people kept trying to bury beneath it. Benton Rusk was waiting near Rhett's SUV. The regional director of Vermilion Ridge looked warm, polished, and entirely unsuspicious. His charcoal coat was tailored for winter without appearing bulky. His boots were clean despite the slush. Silver showed at his temples in a way that suggested experience rather than age. He held a metal pen the color of red copper between two fingers, turning it slowly while he watched Rhett approach. "Sergeant Varden," Benton said. "Or Mr. Trustee. I'm not sure which title is less useful to you today." Rhett stopped several feet away. "If you need to speak about the investigation, call the Attorney General's office. I'm speaking about the town. Then speak at a public meeting." Benton smiled, not insulted. "You're disciplined. I respect that. But discipline can become a lonely religion." Mica's ears moved forward. Benton glanced down at her, then back at Rhett. "You know, people are beginning to ask why a man who wanted nothing to do with Ember Flats suddenly cares so deeply about it. I don't answer for people's guessing. No. But they may answer for yours." Benton lowered his voice slightly, friendly enough that anyone watching from a window would see only conversation. "Military history, internal evaluations, transfers, isolation. A career built on taking the farthest post available. None of that is shameful. But placed beside accusations against a project that could feed this town, it may look less like concern and more like projection." Rhett said nothing. Benton's smile softened, almost sympathetically. A man who stands alone often mistakes silence for purity. Ember Flats doesn't have that luxury. People here need work. They need contracts. They need reasons for their children to come home. For one clean second, Rhett wanted to step closer. Not to hurt him, not even to frighten him, just to make Benton feel the weight of a line. Instead, Rhett looked down at the copper-colored pen. "Good speech," he said. Benton's smile thinned. Rhett opened the SUV door for Mica. "Use it under oath." That evening, the temperature dropped hard enough to turn slush into glass. Rhett drove to Stoneglass for a scheduled preservation check with Marla's written acknowledgement. He did not enter locked spaces. He did not search. He checked exterior doors, tanks, visible pipe runs, and the north fence where Gareth's access damage had been documented. Mica moved differently near the livestock shed. Not excited, not restless, focused. The county seal still crossed the shed door from Marla's entry. The lock had been replaced with one held by the sheriff's office. But the side service door, the one facing the old loading chute, stood slightly open. Rhett stopped. "Mica, stay close." She did not wait for him to pull the leash. She lowered her head and moved toward the service door, slow, shoulders tight. Inside, a shadow shifted. Gareth stepped out with a canvas tool bag in one hand. For a moment, all three of them were still. Then Mica placed herself between Rhett and Gareth. A low sound rose in her chest. Gareth froze. His face looked hollow in the fading light. "Call her off," he said. "She hasn't moved toward you. She's thinking about it." No, Rhett said quietly. She's waiting to see if you make a worse choice. Gareth's grip tightened on the bag. Rhett saw the options arrange themselves the way they always did in tight moments. Close distance, take control, end the uncertainty. But Priya's signed role statement sat in his jacket pocket. Marla's warning sat behind it. And Mica, trembling with restraint, remained exactly where he had asked her to be. "Mica," Rhett said. "Back." The dog hesitated for one heartbeat. Then she stepped backward. Gareth stared at her, as if obedience had struck him harder than force could have. Rhett kept his hands visible. "Set the bag down." Gareth looked toward the road, then toward the shed, then at Mica, who had not stopped watching him. The bag fell into the snow with a dull sound. Inside was the final pressure recorder Cyrus had installed, wrapped in a rag still intact. Marla arrived 20 minutes later. Priya came 30 minutes after that. No one shouted. No one dragged a confession out under bright lights. They documented the door, the bag, the recorder, Gareth's presence, Rhett's call time, Mica's position, and the fact that Rhett had not touched the device before Marla arrived. Only after the recorder was sealed did Gareth begin to talk. He sat on the porch step of the annex with his head down, key ring hanging from one finger. "Benton knew," he said. He knew the agreement wasn't enough, said it didn't matter if nobody challenged it until the project was too far along. Priya stood a few feet away, recorder visible between them. And the payments? Relocation assistance. That's what they called it. Gareth swallowed. "Debt money. Back rent. Truck loan. Things I was already behind on. You removed meters. Yes. You damaged trust fencing. Yes. You allowed access after being told your authority was disputed." Gareth closed his eyes. "Yes." Rhett stood near the water tank with Mica beside him. He did not feel satisfaction. That surprised him less than it should have. Gareth's collapse was not justice. It was only a man running out of places to hide. Later, in Marla's office, Priya laid out the situation plainly. The pipe, pump, recorder, and Gareth's statements were enough to seek an emergency order stopping unauthorized water draw from Stoneglass infrastructure. But proving a broader land and water scheme across multiple properties required more. "We need his communication account," Priya said. "Not just screenshots, access, metadata, original messages. We need him willing to testify that he understood what they asked him to do." Gareth sat at the end of the table, looking smaller than he had at the ranch. "If I do that," he said, "I'm done here." Marla did not soften it. "You may be facing consequences either way." "No, I mean done." Gareth looked at Rhett for the first time. "You don't get it. You can leave whenever you want. That's your talent. I testify against Vermilion. I lose the only people still willing to pay me. I admit what I did. Half this town spits when I pass. Who hires me then? Who rents to me?" Rhett could have told him the truth without mercy. Instead, he waited until his own anger settled. "Cyrus didn't build the trust to keep outsiders away," Rhett said. "He built it because he knew anyone can become dangerous when they decide their escape is worth someone else's water." Gareth looked down at his keys. Rhett's voice stayed low. "I'm not promising you a clean way out. I don't have one. But if you keep helping them hide it, you're not trapped by this town. You're choosing who gets trapped with you." Gareth said nothing. That night, Rhett returned to the rental house after midnight. He fed Mica, checked her shoulder, and placed her bowl near the kitchen wall. She ate slowly, then followed him to the bedroom doorway. She had never crossed it before. Rhett sat on the edge of the narrow bed, boots still on, jacket hanging from the chair. He expected her to turn back toward the front door. Instead, Mica walked in, circled once near the foot of the bed, and lay down facing the room. Not the exit. The room became very quiet. Rhett did not reach for her. He had learned by then that trust could be ruined by grabbing at it too soon. He only turned off the lamp. In the dark, Mica's breathing settled into the space between the heater clicks and the far-off sound of trucks moving through town. It was not healing. Not exactly. It was not forgiveness, not rescue, not the neat ending people liked to give broken things. It was one more night. For both of them, that was not small. At 7:12 the next morning, Rhett Varden walked into the sheriff's office carrying a prepaid phone, a folded contract, and a face that looked as if he had not slept. Marla was at the front desk pouring coffee. Gareth set the phone down carefully, as though it might still decide his future without him. "Tell Agent Desai," he said. "I remember the password." By Monday morning, Ember Flats had learned how to argue in the snow. The emergency hearing on Vermilion Ridge's water draw was set for Friday, and 4 days suddenly felt like too much time for fear to multiply. The town did not erupt all at once. It divided in small, ordinary places. At the grocery store, 2 women stopped speaking beside the flower shelf after one said her well had turned shallow, and the other said her son had finally been promised steady work. At the gas station, a mechanic taped a Vermilion Ridge flyer to the window because the company had ordered fuel in advance, and a rancher tore it down because his stock tank had dropped 6 inches in a week. Outside the church, 3 men stood under a white roofline of melting snow and argued about whether a town could afford principals when its young people had already left. Rhett Varden saw all of it without needing to look for it. He was still assigned to winter operations, still driving the canyon road, still wearing the dark navy uniform of Utah Highway Patrol. But now every stoplight, every fuel pump, every plowed shoulder seemed to carry Stoneglass with it. People who had nodded politely 3 days earlier now watched him as if he were either a shield or a threat. Mica felt it too. The German Shepherd rode in the back of his patrol SUV, wearing her plain collar and temporary foster tag. She had gained a little strength, enough that her ribs no longer drew Rhett's eyes first, but she still carried herself like an animal that knew every room could change without warning. When Rhett stopped outside the county building, her ears shifted toward raised voices before the words became clear. Inside, Priya Desai had turned a small conference room into a disciplined storm. Folders lay in rows. Cobalt evidence tape marked sealed materials. Sienna Page's well maps covered one wall. Sheriff Marla Pennock stood near the coffee maker, with her red notebook open, jaw set in the expression of a woman who trusted paper more than outrage. Rhett Varden sat at the far end of the table, both hands wrapped around a paper cup he had not drunk from. He looked worse in daylight. Without anger holding him upright, he seemed thinner, his work jacket hanging loose at the shoulders, the key ring on the table in front of him, like a small pile of old claims. He had given Priya the password to the prepaid phone. He had also given her something none of them had expected, a hand-drawn route map showing where Vermilion Ridge crews had opened temporary channels above the old survey road. Sienna studied the map with a stillness that made Rhett uneasy. "These cuts are recent?" she asked. Gareth nodded. "Last 3 weeks. Benton said they were for equipment drainage. They cross natural runoff lines," Sienna said. Marla looked up. "Meaning? If warm rain hits the snowpack before Friday, water won't follow the usual wash. It could jump west, toward Stoneglass, maybe toward the lower homes." Preacha closed one folder. "How likely?" Sienna did not dramatize it. That made the answer worse. "Likely enough that I wouldn't wait to prepare." Rhett felt the room tilt toward action. Then Priya looked at him. "Not alone," she said. "I didn't say anything. You were about to become useful in the most legally inconvenient way possible." Marla snorted into her coffee. Rhett looked at the map again. The lines were simple. Channels, cuts, old roads, culverts, tanks, homes. But every line ended somewhere people lived. Outside the conference room, the town kept dividing. By noon, Benton Rusk had moved faster than the weather. A local online page published a long post about Rhett, written in that careful tone that pretended concern was not accusation. It called him a decorated former service member, a state officer with a troubled adjustment history, a man who had requested remote postings and avoided long-term assignments. It did not accuse him of lying. It did not need to. It asked whether Ember Flats should entrust its economic future to someone whose connection to the town began with family property and unresolved personal strain. Rhett read the post once on Marla's phone. His face did not change. That seemed to worry Jules Kettering more than anger would have. She had come in to update Mica's foster paperwork, and now stood near the doorway, with snow melting off her boots, her green-gray county jacket open over a hoodie. "You don't have to swallow that whole," Jules said. "I don't plan to answer it. That isn't what I said." Priya took the phone from Marla and set it face down. "If you respond publicly, they will make this about you. They want a story with one unstable man at the center. We keep it about water, records, permits, and safety." Rhett understood. He even agreed. That did not stop the old heat from climbing into his hands. The post had not lied exactly. That was its skill. Rhett had avoided people. He had chosen distant assignments. He had once sat through evaluations after a mission that ended with fewer men coming home whole than had left. He had been cleared for duty. He had also learned that clearance and peace were not the same document. Benton had found the seam and pressed. Rhett stepped outside before the room could feel too small. Snow fell lightly now, bright against the courthouse brick. Mica came with him, leash loose. She stood beside the steps, head angled toward the south ridge. For a few seconds, Rhett thought she was listening to traffic. Then she pulled. Not hard, not wildly. Just one firm, decided movement toward the road behind the courthouse. Mica! She looked back once, then pulled again. Rhett followed. The tracks led past the plow shed, across a shallow ditch, and toward the southern slope where old ranch paths threaded between juniper and rock. Mica moved with purpose, nose low, then head up, then nose low again. This was not the tense attention she gave the locked shed. This was search work, but quieter, as if the trail belonged to someone she had already counted as part of her world. Half a mile from town, near a frozen service valve by a buried stock line, Rhett saw a dark shape against the snow. Elwood Kane lay beside the valve box, one leg twisted awkwardly beneath him, shearling coat dusted white. His hat had fallen several feet away. His face was pale with cold, but his eyes opened when Mica reached him. "Well," Elwood muttered, voice thin. "Didn't expect the dog to file the report?" Mica lowered herself against his side, pressing her body along his ribs. Every few breaths she lifted her head and barked toward the trail, measured and sharp, then settled back against him. Rhett crouched beside Elwood, keeping his movements calm. "What happened?" Valve froze. "I got clever. Ground got slick. My hip disagreed with the plan." "Can you move?" "Not with dignity. We'll settle for safely." Rhett called dispatch. Then Marla, then Jules, for animal handling support in case Elwood's sheep had wandered. He checked Elwood for immediate danger, without making a show of it, wrapped him in the emergency blanket from his patrol kit, and let Mica remain where she was. The dog's warmth did more than comfort. It kept Elwood still. When the rescue crew arrived, several townspeople followed at a distance. Word traveled fast in Ember Flats, especially when people had been waiting for something to prove their side right. A woman near the trail whispered, "Stoneglass dog found him." Another said, "Maybe that dog knows who's worth saving." Rhett stood, snow on his shoulders, and felt the sentence move toward myth before anyone could stop it. "No," he said. The small crowd looked at him. "Mica doesn't belong to Stoneglass. She doesn't belong to a side. She found a man who was cold and alone. That's all." Elwood, strapped carefully onto the rescue sled, opened one eye. "That better be the quote. Makes me sound less foolish." A few people laughed, not loudly. Enough to loosen something. The sentence spread anyway, but not as Benton would have shaped it, and not as Rhett could control it. By evening, people were repeating it at the grocery store and the gas station. Mica had no side. Someone was cold and alone, that's all. It did not end the argument. It changed its weight. Late that afternoon, the Weather Service issued a winter hydrology advisory. Warm air was moving north. Rain was expected over the high snowpack by the following night. Sienna's warning sharpened from possible to urgent. The official question became evacuation preparation. The political question became whether preparation would look like panic. At the county building, Marla, Priya, Sienna, Jules, Gareth, and Harlan Mott gathered around the same map. Elwood joined by phone from the clinic, annoyed enough to sound healthier. Harlan Mott had arrived from County Rescue wearing a red jacket, black snow pants, and a helmet clipped to his pack. He was 51, square-built, calm-eyed, with the steady bluntness of a man who had seen enough bad roads to distrust optimism. A roll of orange marking tape hung from his belt. He studied the map Gareth had drawn. "We can stage vehicles on the high lot behind the school. Stock trailers go to Stoneglass if the south lane holds. If it doesn't, they go east to the fairground." "Stoneglass as a staging point?" Priya asked. "High ground," Sienna said. "If the new cuts divert water, the ranch house should stay above it. The lower wash is the concern." Gareth rubbed both hands over his face. "There's an old equipment road behind the ridge. Vermilion used it. Not on current county maps." Marla's pen stopped. "Show me." He did. No one thanked him. No one excused him either. They simply used the information because people might need it. That was harder on Gareth than blame. Rhett stood at the edge of the group until Harlan looked at him. "You know radios?" "Some. Some military, some, or some civilian, some." Rhett hesitated. Marla looked over. Priya waited. Jules was kneeling beside Mica, checking the foster tag clasp. Gareth stared at the table as if the map had become a confession. Rhett had a name in his phone he had not touched in years: Troy Ransom. He could picture Troy clearly enough that it hurt. Hazel eyes, short dark hair, easy stance, the kind of man who never asked a question before offering the right tool. Rhett had ignored birthdays, reunion messages, one invitation to a wedding, and 3 short texts that had only said, "Still here." Rhett took out his phone. He stepped into the hallway, then stopped. Old habit told him to make the call where no one could hear failure. A newer, less familiar instinct kept him beside the open door. Troy answered on the 4th ring. No accusation, no surprise forced into cheer, just a quiet voice. "Rhett!" Rhett looked through the doorway at the map, at Mica lying beside Jules, at Gareth's bowed head, at people waiting for information instead of rescue from one man. "I need help setting a temporary radio net through canyon terrain," Rhett said. "Cell service may drop. Stormwater risk. Mixed rescue and civilian traffic." A pause. Then Troy said, "You calling before it breaks?" Rhett's throat tightened in a way he disliked. "Yes." Troy let out a slow breath. "Then it's already different." Rhett did not answer. He also did not hang up. For the next hour, Troy walked them through a plan. Repeater placement, channel discipline, call signs simple enough for volunteers, backup batteries kept warm inside vehicles, check-in intervals. No one moving into a wash without confirmation from Harlan. Rhett relayed the steps. Harlan modified them for local terrain. Marla assigned deputies. Jules organized temporary animal pens. Sienna marked dangerous runoff lines. Priya secured critical records in waterproof cases. Gareth identified 3 access cuts. Vermilion had not disclosed. No one called it trust. They simply worked as if the word had become a verb. Night settled over Ember Flats, pale and cold. The snow on the red cliffs reflected the last light in long glowing bands. At Stoneglass, Rhett checked the tanks, secured the porch, and placed Mica's bowl inside the kitchen. This time, she drank without moving it. Then she lay near the door, not blocking it, not waiting to flee, simply listening. Rhett stood beside the window, with his phone still in his hand. Troy had texted a frequency list, then one more message. "Keep the line open." Rhett looked at it for a long time. Outside, the town below him glowed in scattered squares of yellow light. Some of those people doubted him. Some needed him. Some resented that they needed anyone. The storm had not arrived yet, and there was still time for the hearing, the case, the company, and the weather to break in ways no map could fully predict. Rhett typed 2 words, "Will do." He set the phone on the windowsill where he could hear it. For once, the silence in the house did not mean nobody was coming. It meant the call had already been made. The rain began before midnight. It did not arrive like a storm should have arrived in winter. There was no black wall of clouds swallowing Ember Flats, no thunder rolling through the red cliffs, no dramatic warning that made people stop and look up. The first drops were soft and almost harmless, tapping against snow that had been clean and bright only hours before. Then the snow began to shine. Under the emergency lights at Stoneglass Ranch, every drift turned slick and silver. Warm rain soaked into the white crust, gathered, failed to sink through the frozen ground, and began to move. Thin lines became threads. Threads became sheets. Sheets found old ruts, road cuts, sheep trails, tire marks, anything lower than the ground beside it. By 1 in the morning, water was running over snow. Rhett Varden stood near the ranch gate in a reflective jacket over his dark navy uniform, one gloved hand resting on the hood of his patrol SUV, while he watched headlights climb toward the high lot. Families arrived in pickups, stock trailers, old sedans, and one church van with chains on the tires. Some had come early because Marla Pennock had told them to. Others had waited until the rain made waiting feel foolish. Stoneglass, the place Rhett had intended to refuse, had become the safest high ground north of town. Mica stood beside him in an orange reflective dog vest. Her long leash looped through Rhett's belt and held short in his hand. Rain darkened the black saddle across her back, and gathered along the notch in her left ear. She was alert but controlled, watching the line of vehicles as if counting them. Rhett did not let her run free. He had seen too many people mistake loyalty for invincibility. A brave dog could still misstep. A trained dog could still be swept away. Mica had already been abandoned once by someone who treated usefulness as a reason to keep or discard a living creature. Rhett would not make a cleaner version of the same mistake by asking her to prove too much. At the school lot below, Sheriff Marla Pennock's voice came over the radio. "High lot is at 70%. We're moving late arrivals to Stoneglass. Road edges are getting soft near mile marker 12. Rhett pressed the mic. "Copy. North gate is open. South pen's ready. Jules has animal intake set by the shed." Across the yard, Jules Kettering moved between temporary animal pens with a headlamp over her red beanie, her green-gray jacket half covered by an orange safety vest. She guided a nervous goat into a panel pen, then pointed a family toward the warming room set up inside the ranch house. She looked as if she had been born annoyed by preventable emergencies, which made her perfect for this one. Sienna Page stood under the porch roof with a waterproof clipboard, updating runoff marks from the gauges she had placed before dark. Priya Desai remained near the dining table inside, where sealed folders and drives sat inside waterproof cases. Cobalt blue evidence tape marked each latch. No one had wanted Stoneglass to become a command post. It had happened because the land sat high, the old ranch yard was wide, and Cyrus Varden, dead and stubborn, had built water systems as if future strangers might one day need them to work. The first warning came as a dull report from the North Ridge. Not loud enough to be a crash, too heavy to be a branch. Sienna lifted her head from the clipboard. Rhett looked toward the canyon. A second sound followed, lower and longer, like gravel being poured through a metal chute beneath the earth. The radio crackled. Harlan Mott's voice broke through in pieces. "County rescue to Stoneglass. Temporary berm. Gave way near survey cut 3. Water moving west. Repeat. Water moving west," Marla answered at once. "Harlan, confirm your position. Static." Then Gareth Varden's voice, strained and too close to the mic. "We're near the old culvert below the North Equipment Road. We have one worker with us. Bridge planks gone. Harlan's shoulder is bad, but he's talking. Water's rising." Rhett turned toward Sienna. She was already at the map. "Old culvert," she said. "If they're where I think, the main road won't see them. It's tucked behind the cottonwoods." Priya stepped out onto the porch, coat buttoned against the rain. "Gareth has the waterproof case?" "He had it when they left," Marla said over the radio from below. Another burst of static. Then Harlan, weaker but steady. "No one comes down the wash without line support. Repeat, no one comes down without." The signal vanished. Rhett was moving before the silence finished forming, but not alone. That was the difference. "Marla," he said into the radio, "I'm heading toward the culvert from Stoneglass side. Need rescue rope and 2 holders at the upper cottonwood line." "Already turning," Marla answered. "Do not enter the wash before Harlan confirms ground." Rhett looked toward Mica. The dog was already facing north. Rain ran hard down the slope by then, making the snow collapse underfoot in soft, dangerous pockets. Rhett kept Mica on the long line, giving her room to work, but not enough to vanish into darkness. 2 county volunteers followed with rope bags and lights. Behind them, Jules called that she had the animal medical kit ready if needed. The path dropped behind the livestock shed and curved along a shallow drainage cut. Water moved there in a brown ribbon over white snow, carrying pine needles, slush, and pieces of broken brush. Mica tracked along the upper edge, nose low, then head up, then low again. A shape flashed near the willows to Rhett's left. The waterproof evidence case. It was caught for a moment under a tangle of roots turning slowly in the current. The cobalt evidence tape across one corner was visible beneath a wash of mud. Priya's case. Gareth must have lost it when the bridge went. Rhett stopped. The case held original notes, the pressure log, the prepaid phone, documents that could keep Vermilion from pretending the water had moved by chance. Without it, Priya still had copies, but originals mattered. Chain of custody mattered. Benton Rusk would use any gap he could find. The case shifted. One root held it back. The current pulled harder. Mica jerked toward the opposite bank. Rhett tightened his grip. "Mica." She pulled again, not toward the case, but toward the dark line of the old culvert hidden behind a fallen cottonwood. Her body lowered. Her ears went forward. Then she made one sound, short and urgent. Not a bark for attention, but a report. Rhett looked from the case to the dark culvert. For a moment, the old world opened inside him. The simple world. The ruthless one. Secure the evidence. Preserve the case. Win the fight that could save the town tomorrow. Then from behind the cottonwood came a voice, thin beneath rushing water. "Here!" Rhett let the case go. "Show me," he told Mica. She moved immediately. The culvert was half hidden by a fallen tree and a shelf of snow that had slumped off the bank. Mica found the narrow opening before any human light did. She dropped low, pushed through wet branches, and stopped with her front paws braced against concrete. Rhett pulled the light across the gap. Gareth was inside, pinned by a bent rail across his legs, pale with cold and rain. Harlan Mott crouched beside him, one arm held close to his body, helmet lamp flickering. A young equipment operator sat behind them, shaking so hard his teeth clicked. His name patch read Miles Traver. He looked 28 at most, with mud across one cheek and terror held barely behind his eyes. Mica pressed her muzzle against Gareth's shoulder, then turned back to Rhett. She did it again. Not frantic, not dramatic. A practice signal from a dog who had once been trained to find the living and stay until someone listened. "Harlan," Rhett called. "Can you move?" Harlan's face was gray, but his voice came back hard. "I can command. That's movement enough. No one enters without a line. Ground's undercut on your right." Rhett hated the delay. He hated the seconds it took to anchor rope around the cottonwood. Hated the time needed for Marla's team to arrive from below with more lights. Hated watching Miles try not to break while Gareth stared at Mica as if the dog's refusal to leave him was worse than judgment. But Rhett waited. He let Marla clip the harness around him. Let Harlan, from inside the culvert, talk the volunteers through angle and footing. Let the team set a second rope because one was not enough. "Hold me if the water shifts," Rhett said. Marla looked at him through the rain. "That's the first smart thing you've said all night." "Second," Jules called from behind them. He followed the dog. They pulled Miles out first. The young worker crawled toward the light on trembling arms and collapsed into the hands waiting for him. Harlan came next, arguing the whole way because he disliked being treated like a patient. Marla ignored the complaints and had him wrapped in a thermal blanket. Gareth was last. The rail that trapped him had to be lifted slowly, only enough to slide him free. Rhett worked under Harlan's instructions, one knee in slush, one hand numb inside his glove. Mica remained near the opening, line taut, body low. Every time Gareth's breathing grew shallow, she touched her muzzle to his sleeve. "Why is she doing that?" Gareth whispered. Rhett did not look up. "She doesn't like leaving people behind." Gareth closed his eyes. The rail shifted. At the same moment, the snow shelf above the culvert gave way. Not a full collapse, just enough. Wet snow and mud slid toward the opening, and water surged hard across the bank. Rhett felt the rope snap tight across his harness. He staggered one step. Mica lunged backward against her leash. The pull yanked Rhett away from the cut edge, just as the water tore past where his boot had been. Mica's shoulder struck the exposed rock beside the fallen tree. She dropped with a sharp, breathless sound and tried to rise again. Rhett's whole body turned toward her. Then Gareth cried out as the rail shifted against him. Mica lifted her head from the snow, eyes fixed not on herself, not on Rhett, but on the man still trapped in the culvert. Rhett understood the order she could not give him. "Finish." He turned back. They freed Gareth 2 minutes later. When the team pulled him out, he clutched at Rhett's sleeve once, not to thank him, not to apologize, but because the body sometimes reached for whatever had not let it disappear. Rhett let him hold on until Marla and a volunteer took over. Only then did Rhett drop beside Mica. Jules was already there, hands gentle and efficient. Shoulder impact. She's hurting, but she's alert. Mica tried to stand. "No," Rhett said, softer than he meant to. Mica ignored the word halfway, rising enough to turn her head toward the willows downstream. Gareth, wrapped in a blanket nearby, followed her gaze. His face changed. "The case," he said. "It went out of the ATV when the bridge broke. The phone, the log, all of it." Priya's voice came over Marla's radio. "Some contents were scanned. Originals still matter. Do not risk personnel for documents without rescue control." Mica took one unsteady step toward the water. Rhett caught the leash close to her collar and held her back. No, she looked at him. This time she did not pull. Rhett passed the leash to Jules. Keep her above the line. Jules's eyes narrowed. Rhett, he looked toward Harlan. The rescue coordinator, pale and angry under his blanket, pointed with his good hand. Upper root shelf only, 2 lines. Probe the edge first. Nobody freehands anything. Rhett nodded. He did not say he could do it. He did not say he would be quick. He said, "Tie me in." The words settled over the group more heavily than the rain. Marla clipped the first line herself. A rescue volunteer clipped the second. Harlan directed the angle. Sienna, arriving breathless with a headlamp, marked the safe edge with orange tape from Harlan's belt. Priya reached the slope in time to photograph the scene before anyone moved the case. Rhett crawled low across the checked shelf, keeping his weight spread, one arm extended with a hooked pole. The case had shifted farther under the willow roots. Water slapped against it, pulled back, slapped again. The root holding it was tearing loose fiber by fiber. 6 inches left, Marla called. Rhett breathed once, not to steady himself. To hear everyone else still holding the lines, he hooked the handle. The first pull failed. The second brought the case sideways. The third freed it just as the willow root tore away and vanished downstream. Hands pulled Rhett back before he could celebrate a thing. Priya met him at the taped line with nitrile gloves already on. She photographed the case, noted mud, water exposure, time, location, witnesses, and transfer. Then she sealed it inside a larger dry bag marked with cobalt tape. No one cheered. Miles sat under a blanket, staring at nothing. Harlan's shoulder needed care. Gareth shook from cold and from whatever waited after confession. Mica lay with Jules's hand against her side, eyes open, following Rhett until he knelt beside her again. "You did enough," he said. Mica blinked slowly. Rain eased just before dawn. The red cliffs emerged first as dark shapes behind silver mist. Then light touched the snow, and the whole ridge brightened in impossible colors. White, rose, copper, gold. Water still ran through the cuts below Stoneglass, but now people stood on both sides of it with radios, ropes, clipboards, blankets, and witnesses. The flow was no longer hidden under maps, contracts, and polite promises. It was visible. It was loud. It had forced Ember Flats to look at what was being taken before there was nothing left to measure. The hearing did not happen on Friday. The flood took that choice away from everyone. For 2 weeks, Ember Flats sounded like repair. Chainsaws in the cottonwoods, hammers on porch steps, pickup tires grinding through frozen mud, volunteers hauling sandbags that had already done their work and tarps that had not done enough. The warm rain had passed, the cold had returned, and snow fell again over the same red cliffs, as if winter were trying to cover the evidence of its own interruption. But water had memory. It left brown lines on fence posts, peeled bark from willows, and packed gravel against the sides of homes where children had once left bicycles. It carved through the temporary cuts above the Vermilion Ridge Survey Road and showed, in a language no company report could soften, where the land had been forced to carry more than it should. Rhett Varden spent those 2 weeks doing the work that remained after urgency ended. He directed traffic around damaged bridges. He helped Marla Pennock's deputies mark soft road shoulders. He drove medication to 2 older residents whose driveway had washed out. He wrote statements, signed forms, and answered questions with the careful restraint Priya Desai had taught him to appreciate. Every night he stopped at Dr. Alden Greaves's clinic before going back to the seasonal rental. Mica healed slowly. The German shepherd's shoulder had not been broken, but the impact against the rock had bruised deep tissue and strained the joint. Greaves forbade running, jumping, search drills, and any work that made Mica believe she had to be useful to deserve staying. "That last part is for both of you," he said one evening, while changing the wrap with hands that were gentler than his voice. Rhett stood beside the exam room wall, arms folded, saying nothing. Mica lay on the thick mat Greaves had placed on the floor instead of the metal table she disliked. Her amber eyes followed Rhett the whole time. She did not whine. She did not ask to be touched. But when Greaves finished and stepped back, she moved her muzzle until it rested against Rhett's boot. Not his hand. Not yet. Enough. The hearing finally took place on a clear morning after the canyon road reopened. It was held in the county commission chamber, not a courtroom, but people dressed as if judgment required better coats. Snow shone through the tall windows. The red cliffs beyond town looked impossibly clean. Rhett did not wear his uniform. He came in a charcoal blazer, an off-white shirt, a slate blue tie, dark trousers, and boots polished enough to show effort but not pride. His badge stayed locked in his vehicle. On that day, he was not Utah Highway Patrol. He was the temporary successor trustee of Stoneglass Water Conservancy Trust and a witness to what had happened on the land. Mica was not beside him. That absence changed the room more than he expected. For days, people had looked at the dog before they looked at him. Mica softened doors he did not know how to open. Without her, Rhett felt the old exposure return, shoulders squared, hands still, eyes measuring exits before memory could pretend otherwise. Priya noticed from the table ahead. She did not ask if he was all right. She only placed one cobalt-sealed folder where he could see it. A reminder. The facts did not need him to carry them alone. Administrative Judge Carol Wren presided from the front. She was a small woman with silver hair cut close to her jaw and a voice that made interruption feel unwise. She explained that the hearing concerned emergency water protection, unauthorized infrastructure, and the status of the Stoneglass Trust. Broader civil and state actions would proceed separately. Then Priya began. She did not build a speech, she built a path. Rhett Varden's old water maps came first, each marked with brass tags and dates from years of monitoring. Sienna Page followed with updated readings from residential wells, stock lines, and fractured sandstone routes. Etta Loomis presented county filings, showing the repeated language in Vermilion Ridge's applications and the same flawed separation claim across multiple parcels. Marla testified to the locked shed, the hidden pump, the new pipe, and the documented entry. Harlan Mott described the flood route and the temporary cuts that had redirected runoff toward Stoneglass. Priya then entered the recovered waterproof case into the record, with photographs from the scene, transfer notes, witness names, and the condition report from the night it was pulled from the willow roots. Benton Rusk sat across the aisle in a dark suit and a rust-red tie, his copper-colored pen resting neatly beside his legal pad. When he spoke, he sounded reasonable. Ember Flats needed work. Families needed paychecks. Roads needed investment. Schools needed students whose parents could afford to stay. Vermilion Ridge had come offering development, monitoring, and partnership. He said mistakes had been made in the pressure of early operations, but no company should be condemned for trying to bring a future to a town that had been living on memory. Some people in the room wanted to believe him. Rhett could feel it. That was the hardest part. Benton's lie had not been wrapped around nothing. It had been wrapped around hunger, pride, debt, and the grief of watching a town shrink year after year. Priya did not attack the hunger. She attacked the lie. She showed that Vermilion Ridge had pumped beyond its permitted testing limits. She showed that Rhett Varden had no authority to grant access to trust infrastructure. She showed that the company had continued using his signature after being warned the trust was active. She showed that the same geological claim had appeared where the underlying conditions were not the same. She showed that private hope had been used to hide public risk. When Gareth stood to testify, the room became painfully quiet. He wore a clean flannel shirt beneath his old brown jacket. His hair had been cut. His hands still looked rough and restless. For once, the oversized key ring was not in his fist. It sat on the table in front of him. "I wanted to believe them," he said. His voice cracked once, then steadied. "I wanted to believe somebody with money knew how to save this place. I told myself Cyrus had already left me behind, so I didn't owe his papers much. I signed things I had no right to sign. I took money called relocation support. I removed meters. I opened gates." He looked toward Rhett only once. None of that made the water mine. There was no applause, no gasp, no clean release. Just the weight of a man putting down a lie he had carried too long. Judge Wren issued the emergency order that afternoon. Vermilion Ridge operations around Ember Flats would stop pending full review. The Stoneglass aquifer and monitoring sites would receive temporary protection. The filings and related records would be referred for further state action. Stoneglass Water Conservancy Trust was recognized as valid, with authority to transition into the community board Cyrus had designed. Benton did not fall apart. He closed his pen, spoke quietly to his counsel, and left with the controlled posture of a man already calculating the next room. That felt truer than defeat. After the hearing, Rhett found Gareth in the hallway by a window overlooking the courthouse steps. Snow was falling again, light and almost cheerful, softening the tire tracks below. Gareth did not look at him. "I don't know where I go now." Rhett had thought about many answers. Most of them were too easy. He took a folded card from his coat pocket and held it out. "Road Recovery Program needs equipment people. Harlan said they'll train you on county procedures if you show up sober and on time." Gareth accepted the card slowly. "That forgiveness?" "No." Gareth nodded, as if the honesty helped more than comfort would have. "It's a door," Rhett said. "You still have to walk through it." Gareth looked at the card, then at the snow beyond the glass. Cyrus would have said something meaner, probably. For the first time, Gareth almost smiled. Rhett paid too. The department opened an administrative review because he had been present at multiple events tied to trust property. The finding cleared him of serious misconduct. He had reported his conflict early, stayed outside the investigation, and followed scene procedure during the flood. But the special assignment he had been quietly considered for went to someone else. His captain told him over the phone with unusual gentleness. Rhett waited for the familiar feeling. Proof that connection cost him, proof that helping meant losing ground, proof that every open door eventually closed. It did not come the same way. Maybe because this time he could name what he had kept. Stoneglass transitioned over the next month. Rhett declined the permanent trustee seat. The new board included Sienna for water monitoring, Elwood Kane for small ranch holders, Etta Loomis for records, a town representative, and Marla as emergency liaison. The ranch became a winter refuge site, a public water monitoring station, and a training ground for canyon safety. Jules completed Mica's adoption paperwork after no owner appeared and no valid claim was made. Greaves cleared Mica for ordinary life, careful walks, and light community search demonstrations someday, but not full professional duty. "She doesn't need a job title," Jules said, handing Rhett the final papers. "She needs someone who won't confuse rest with failure." Rhett looked down at Mica. The dog stood between them, shoulder still healing, notched ear lifted, eyes bright in the winter sun. "I'm working on that," he said. When Mica finally returned to Stoneglass, Rhett unclipped her leash inside the fenced yard. She ran first to the gate. Rhett did not call her back. Mica stood there for a long moment, looking down the road toward Ember Flats, toward the truck stop beyond it, toward every place that had ever decided she was no longer worth keeping. Then she turned. She crossed the snowy yard at a calm walk, climbed the porch steps, and lay down beside Rhett's boot, not guarding the exit, claiming the threshold. Rhett took out his phone and called Troy Ransom. This time there was no emergency, no broken signal, no water moving through the dark. "Stoneglass needs a radio tower before next winter," Rhett said. "I can't put it up alone." Troy was quiet for 2 seconds. "What tools should I bring?" Rhett looked across the yard. Gareth was repairing fence with a road crew under Harlan's supervision. Elwood was showing 2 teenagers how to check a trough gauge without wasting water. Sienna was setting a new marker by the storage tank. Marla stood near her cruiser, speaking with Jules about animal evacuation plans. Mica rested on the porch, eyes half closed, listening to all of it. "Enough for 2, Rhett said. Then he paused. Maybe 3. That evening he hung 2 keys beside the ranch house door. One was his. The other waited on a plain brass hook. Outside, snow fell gently across the red stone, the repaired fence, the marked wells, and the new water gauge ticking steadily in its box. No single person had saved Ember Flats. That was what made the place feel possible. Rhett had once believed peace meant no one needing him, and him needing no one. Now he understood it differently. Peace could be a door left unlocked in daylight, a dog sleeping where the cold could not reach her, water running where everyone could see it, and a key waiting for someone trusted enough to come in. In the end, Stoneglass was never just about land, water, or a legal fight. It was about the quiet moment when a person has to decide what cannot be traded away. Rhett learned that strength is not always rushing in alone. Sometimes strength is asking someone else to hold the rope. Gareth learned that a promise built on fear can still be refused, and Mica, a dog once left behind because she was no longer considered useful, reminded everyone that life is not measured by what we can produce, but by who we refuse to abandon. Maybe grace often comes that way, not as a loud miracle, but as a second chance, a hand on the line, a door left open, or a loyal soul waiting beside us until we choose the better road. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you would have done in Rhett's place, and please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of courage, loyalty, and hope. May peace find its way to your door too.